Thank you. Hey, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name's Dan Morris. I lead the editorial and operations teams for the Oculus store. And I've been doing that for a couple of years now, so I've had a chance to take in lots of questions from developers like you about what works in the store at any given time. So I always look forward to opportunities like this to kind of send that information back into larger groups, because there's a lot of cool learning that we've had. This presentation is basically in two parts. I'm going to talk about some of these high-level learnings of marketing best practices in the store. Then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Lisa Brewster, who manages our app review and submissions, and she's going to talk about some improvements that we've been making to help you get through tech review successfully. So I'll start with a little bit of history, because I think it's useful to understand kind of where we've come from. There have basically been three eras of our store. The first started about 2.5 years ago with the launch of Consumer Edition of Gear VR. It was basically the era of quality control. One thing that I take very seriously and that my team takes very seriously is that users who are pretty new to VR should probably be having a pretty safe, good, bug-free, and certainly nausea-free experience. So we have like really buckled down, especially in the early days, on just QA from a user experience perspective, user comfort perspective. And we got very good at that. It's not an easy project, as you can imagine, especially on the mobile side of life, where there are so many configurations of OS and Samsung device. It's tricky. It's a big matrix of quality assurance. But we eventually got good at it, and we were able to pretty much guarantee that a user was going to get the experience that they signed up for when they downloaded. I think the downside was it took time. And if you were submitting to us back in those days, you probably noticed how much time it took for us to get something through tech review. It was just too long. So that moved us into the second era of the store, which was the era of speedy review, where we maintained the quality control practices that we had built up, but we got better at doing it faster. And now I'm happy to say that the vast majority of the submissions that we receive from you move through tech review in days, not weeks. And the output is still at a very high level of user quality. So that's the good news. We've figured out how to do that pretty well, and I think we're built to scale for the years ahead. But that brings me to the era that I'm actually most passionate about, which is the third era, the era that we're embarking on these days, which is the era of awesome discovery. I, like you, spend a lot of time thinking about what a VR native app store could do to get a person acquainted with your app even before download and really make the best possible decision about whether to download/buy it based on a preview of what's inside it. So we'll talk a little bit more about what we're going to do in the months ahead about trying to get discovery just a little bit more exciting. So I get a relatively small band of questions from developers when they ask me about the store. And I've basically boiled those questions down into a handful of slides so that I can kind of check off the big ones that we get very commonly. The most important one is what's selling. And that's no surprise there. Not that every developer is in the business of charging for apps today. Many of you are not. But many of you are. And so the question is just that simple. Like, what is selling right now? I divide this answer into sort of a few parts, because there are different types of VR, and there are different implications for what's selling. When it comes to premium apps, meaning it's got a price and a person has to decide to pay for it to download the app, the answer is pretty much games right now. That's not exclusively what is selling at premium price points. There are lots of things that are selling at premium price points. But if you actually looked at our revenue graph, the majority of the things that people are spending money on are games for now. This goes sort of double true on the PC side, where the prices are higher and the games are a bit thicker and richer. At lower price tiers, yeah, it's still games. There's still high-quality games that sell at the lower price tiers. But now here we also start to see consumers are opting into spending on all kinds of stuff, a mix of app types. And that's true for PC and it's true for mobile. So I want to quickly just show you some of the things. We all sort of know what games are, and many of you are making them. You don't need to be told what those are. But I want to give you a sense of what types of non-game apps are actually commanding some consumer revenue right now. And I noticed a theme kind of emerging when I was looking at the list of non-game apps that are selling. They're pulse-raising experiences, by and large. They're experiences that people can't easily get or ever get in real life. And that actually makes perfect sense when you think about what people are doing early on in their experience with VR. We see horror apps selling quite well at lower price points. We see jumping out of planes selling quite well. We have a wingsuit game called Rush that has done very well. We have, of course, everyone's favorite, the roller coasters. I've been sort of looking askance at roller coasters for 2.5 years now. We just keep selling roller coaster apps at relatively low price points. Human beings, it turns out, really likes to try roller coasters in VR. We see racing, high-powered car driving is a fantasy that people get to live out in VR. And then a thing that I've noticed too is just the sort of call of outer space. Something like Apollo 11 comes to mind. People are very interested in not just shooting aliens with lasers, but learning more about the space program, stepping out for a moonwalk, that type of thing. The theme that underlines all of these things, of course, is spectacular experiences that you just don't get to have by and large. So I float this out there for your information. I think people are drawn to VR for the reason that maybe most of us were first drawn to VR. It's a vehicle for extraordinary sensations, and that's what people are paying for here in these early days of consumer revenue. So that's the lower price tiers. The other thing I want to make you aware of is now that we have touch controls for both the PC and mobile platform, the revenue has pivoted entirely in that direction, almost literally entirely in that direction. So that is something to know. Whether it's the touchpad for Gear VR or a gamepad controller for that matter, the revenue has really shifted to the new generation touch controllers that we make. That's just something to keep in mind. If you are someone focused on revenue, this is very much, it's not even a trend anymore. This battle has been concluded. Like consumer revenue is tipped toward touch. And then a last note that I want to make, because I get asked about this a lot, the question I get is, well, does new IP have a chance? Does my original wholly owned, completely unknown IP have a chance at selling? The answer is yes. Of course, popular, well-known IP has an advantage in our app store, just like it has an advantage in any app store. But we're seeing just as many brand new VR concepts and VR launches perform quite well, both from a revenue perspective and a downloads perspective. So I just want to let you know that it's not a blocker. You aren't under any obligation to seek out well-known IP, which most developers can't afford in any case. We're seeing brand new IP stand up and hold its own in the App Store. So that is something I'm personally very encouraged about. I get asked a lot of questions about what people are searching for. So in Gear VR in particular, where we've got a mobile app and a very handy search bar, what are people typing in? I want to give you some answers, but I also want to caveat it. Just as Mr. Abrash an hour ago was saying, it's still very early days and we're all pioneers in this room. I think our search bar is still in a very early stage too. I think people are searching for some obvious things, but for what it's worth, here's what they're looking for. Number one is free stuff. And let's put that in context. I don't want those of you with business plans for consumer revenue to set those plans on fire and pivot to a free model. Please don't do that. The point I'm trying to make here is a pretty obvious one. It's no surprise to me that people type in free stuff when they first do a search for their Gear VR, because why wouldn't they? It turns out 10 years into a very mature iOS App Store ecosystem, searches for free things are still the #1 search. So don't be afraid of this if you're a revenue seeker. It's just a simple fact. I take a lot of encouragement from the fact that specific app titles are being searched for. This is awesome because it strongly implies that new VR owners, of our devices anyway, have heard of some of the new IP that is out there and has made a name for itself in the press or through word of mouth with other VR enthusiasts. They're coming and they're searching for original VR IP. So that is just fantastically encouraging that this early adopting audience is savvy enough to be looking for that stuff. Categories matter a lot. You know, the genres that the entertainment industry have been teaching us for the last 45 years or so, the consumer is, for better or worse, very well trained on that stuff. So just be aware that people are typing categories like horror app or space app or racing games pretty frequently. And they're, you know, that may or may not be orthogonal to the app you're trying to market, but where you sense some overlap, it's something to think about for your keywords and titles and so on. And then I'll continue the theme. Pulse-raising experiences are what people are searching for. So I had a wonderful education moment some months ago. I noticed that one of the most searched words in the search bar was Montana. And I thought, what the heck is that? There can't be this many people searching for apps about Montana. Well, as those of you from Spanish-speaking countries have probably already figured out, the word is actually montaña, and it's the Spanish-speaking world looking for roller coaster apps, because that is the Spanish word that is used for roller coasters. That was interesting for me. So we just continue to see more data points like this. People are searching for exciting things, and that's something to be aware of. So what are best marketing practices for anybody? If you're in the store, what types of things should you be aware of and doing? Number one is that any app update that you do is an opportunity for like a good new marketing blitz. And something that my team really likes to do is work with developers on our platform very proactively in advance of an update to have your store asset refresh ready to go. In particular, a cool new cover. Like we've seen real nice surges of new users and new revenue when a cover gets updated, when there's a big promise in that cover image. It's a great opportunity for us to feature something again. So view your app update as a marketing update too. One of my bugaboos is that screenshot quality is typically not great. And specifically what I mean by that is, I think many developers are under the misapprehension that the purpose of their 5 screenshots in the App Store is to convey all of the features of their app. And they almost view it as a checklist for the different utility value propositions, as opposed to using the screenshots to show what is exciting about the app. And my advice to you about screenshots is show people what is exciting about the app versus using them to display features. Logo design is a worthwhile investment. We have really seen, and we're starting to get data on this now, that a very easy to discern logo is helpful. It will get you more clicks and clicks through to install. Whereas a very abstract, hard to discern logo is unhelpful. It's a bit of a blocker. So bear that in mind. I actually think the relatively small investment in a professionally or semi-professionally designed logo is money well spent. And then finally, as a former journalist, description text is really kind of near and dear to my heart. We just generally see the description text is pretty rough. This is another area to invest maybe a modicum of money and certainly some of your time into. The description text is a perfect opportunity to really convey what's exciting or useful about your app. And so we urge you to spend some time and effort on that. So I've been talking about cover images quite a bit. And the implication is that there's an optimal cover image. I'm not sure that there's a science to this, but there are definitely some trends that I think I can share. Number one is I just wanted to show you 6 images of 6 apps that get downloaded very efficiently, meaning if the click to install rate on them is quite high. So here's 6. They're pretty different apps. Some of these are games, some of these are not games. Some of these are produced by Oculus, some of them are produced by outside developers. Some of them are free and some of them are paid. So it's an interesting cross-section, but what they all have in common is particularly good install rates based on the impressions that they get in our store. And I've been working with our data science team to try to analyze this trend in recent months, and our work on that continues. But the one thing that I think I can safely conclude is that a clean, very easy to discern cover image is a plus. That is really kind of emerging as a rule. And one nice thing I like about the selection behind me here is that these cover images sort of imply or semi-promise very different experiences, but it's pretty clear what kind of app it is. And I think this has been a big boon to these developers. This cover image has really helped them to convert. So I think simplicity and a way to quickly evoke what the app is going to do for the person who downloads it is smart best practice. Let's talk a little bit about business models, because this is probably the other thing I get asked about the most. I get asked a question that just makes my heart grow twice in size, and the question is like, what should I be charging? Should I be charging at all? Should I go into a free-to-play model? The answer is, it's so early for there to be any rules of the road. Like, experimentation is the order of the day. But I do want to arm you with some information, and the first bit of information is that the paid premium model, meaning you ask the consumer for money for the download, accounts for 99% of our revenue today on Rift. In-app purchase accounts for a mere 1% of Rift revenue. That is not destiny. That is not to say that there will not be healthy, big free-to-play businesses on PC when we're at scale. But I think it's important to know that free-to-play is a vanguard of a vanguard right now. And the overwhelming majority of revenue is coming from the paid premium model. On Gear VR, this is maybe the more interesting detail. It's still the case. It's not quite as stark. But there is still a massive break between the percentage of revenue that comes from IAP, which is just 11% on Gear VR, and the percentage that comes from a full paid premium transaction, fully 89%. So I give that to you as just an update. This is a snapshot of a relatively early moment in our history. There are already some IAP-driven businesses on Gear VR in particular that are doing quite well for themselves. You're going to hear from one of them later today. The Casino VR Poker folks are speaking. You should invest some time in their talk because they're conspicuously doing quite a good job of IAP conversion. But for what it's worth, it is still very much a paid premium model that is ascendant right now. And then just a quick observation about price range, because I get asked about this a lot too. Okay, I'm going to charge for a premium download. What should I charge? Again, this is not a science, and there's no rules of the road. But for what it's worth, we definitely see that the majority of our revenue overall is coming from the higher price tier. And I don't think any developer can be under illusions about the competitiveness of their app at a $40 to $60 price point or a $7 to $10 price point for Gear VR. But these are the price points that we see generating the most revenue in total. And I make this observation mainly to say that if you think you've got a great app, if you think you've got a winner, you should charge for it. You should get yourself somewhere into the upper tier of the price points respective to these platforms. Because when consumers get wind of something quite good on this platform, they're willing to pay these kinds of prices for them. There's another viable price range, but it's further down. On Rift, we see some really healthy, cool businesses charging $25 or less, 20 bucks and under seems to be a really good, healthy, viable price range for strong apps that aren't necessarily going to go toe-to-toe with $50 apps, but have really got an audience waiting for them at a more approachable price point. And that equivalent price point on Gear is generally about $3 or less. There's a wonderful app called Affected the Manor. It's one of the better kind of haunted house scare ride apps, doing great business for itself at this price point. These are a viable price point too. I want to make you aware of some analytics improvements that we've made. We've really been working hard and investing a lot of cycles in improving the developer dashboard that you use. So I just want to make sure that everybody is aware of some updates we shipped recently that actually are pretty useful. One of those is real-time revenue tracking. This is the ability to see up to the minute sales results. And believe it or not, if you were not aware, we were lacking this feature until just a couple of months ago. It was kind of a bummer. I would hear from super sad developers who were surprised by this. I'm very happy to say that we've fixed that. You now have real-time revenue tracking in your dashboard. You've also got country and device level breakdowns, which is a very smart way to get efficient about your business. You can now see which countries are contributing more or less to your revenue and download picture. You can also see that broken down by device. We've now made data exportable. You can take a CSV file and put it into your own documents and analyze that way. So that's great. Those of you who use some kind of third-party analytics platform can now just stick that data in and really track your own business over time, which I encourage you to do. And finally, we're going to be launching very, very soon the Oculus Graph API, which behaves a lot like the Facebook Graph API for those of you who have integrated Facebook's Graph API before. It's just the Oculus version of it. So Oculus friends are now available to be unlocked in your app by calling this API. And that will be ready very, very soon. The last thing I want to close on before turning things over to Lisa is to go back to that third era of awesome discovery and give you an update that was touched on in the keynote a little while ago. I'm going to go into slightly more detail on what we call the World Store. So one reason I got so excited about this job was the opportunity to reinvent app stores and to start to conceive of what a VR native app store might be like. And it's pretty easy for me to imagine the eventual benefits to developers of a VR native app store that can showcase your work in some exciting new ways. Now that is a big project. It is going to take a long time to get it into a state where it can really deliver on the promise. But we are underway, and some things to know about the project that we're underway on. We are designing an app store for touch, and all that implies. I view 2D interfaces that are largely just 2D art and screenshots and maybe a video as a fairly inefficient way to showcase the work of an app developer. Whereas allowing the user to move very fluidly and intuitively through a catalog using hand gestures just makes a ton of sense. So we're now embarked on this interaction model, and some very smart user experience designers at Oculus are helping us with this. I just briefly touched on the user-directed search. I think editorial teams are always going to matter, but we really want a user to be able to dive deep into our store and find things that that person is very specifically interested in. And search is one way to do it. It kind of works. It's better than nothing. But the ability to go on a self-directed dive into our store is something that we're very passionate about. So that's getting some work too. It's going to be designed to preview VR experiences before download. I think this is critical. We're in a state right now, unfortunately, where a VR headset owner is still having to guess, largely, about the VR experience that is waiting on the other side of a download. We want to try to knock down some of those walls with a store that can meaningfully preview the VR experience of the app before you make the decision to pay for it. And finally, the thing that I'm probably most passionate about, because I was once working for a mobile game developer who our entire destiny felt tied to whether or not we got featured by the Apple or Google app stores. It was a pretty bad sensation that some of you are probably familiar with. We call that the discovery problem. It's just a very inefficient choke point where the user's eyeballs meet the front of the store, and so many wonderful apps are on the other side of that choke point. I think our belief is that once VR allows an app store to literally immerse you and surround you with a 360-degree sphere, we should be able to make some dents in the discovery problem. And that remains another focus of this next period of R&D. So I'll close on this note. This is a sneak peek at a development project that we're underway on. We have store engineering and product teams hard at work on this, with UX people, with data people, all trying to take that first step of innovation into a VR native retail environment that surrounds you and is at the heart of the store experience of our platform. We think there are many opportunities here to work with you to showcase your app in more meaningful ways. That is a discussion that is going to take time. Probably a lot of smart folks from this audience stepping forward to help us think this through. We're certainly bringing some ideas of our own to the table. But the goal is very clear and simple, and that's to expand your discovery opportunities in a meaningfully VR native store. So we are very pleased to be embarking on this. We're looking forward to your ideas and thoughts about it in the months ahead. I'll be back for a Q&A in a little bit, but for now I want to turn it over to my colleague Lisa to talk about some of the improvements we've made to our tech review.